Hi everyone, here I am with a new mini restyling project. Today I'm going to show you this glass dish that was probably a salad bowl. I don't even know exactly what it was. I've had it at home for many years, but I never use it. I cleaned it thoroughly with a degreaser. As you can see, I use this universal degreaser, but any kind will do. With glass, there aren't any major issues as long as you clean it well with a degreaser, whatever you prefer, even ammonia if you like it. Just make sure it's really clean, even along the edges, in the corners, everywhere. And I want to show you this restyling on glass because I really want to prove to you that homemade paint, DIY kit paint, sticks perfectly even to glass as long as it's cleaned well, okay? So make sure to degrease it thoroughly, just like I'm doing now with a sponge, using the green side, even along the edges, everywhere. You'll see there won't be any issues. The paint will adhere perfectly as long as it's cleaned well. I rinsed it directly under running water at the sink, and since it's glass, it's no problem. You can easily rinse it underwater. It's not a wooden piece of furniture that would swell if you put it under water. I rinsed it really well to remove the degreaser. You could even put it in the dishwasher. It's just a piece of glass. In my case, this one was a bit big and would have taken up the whole dishwasher, so I preferred to do it this way, but you can also put it in the dishwasher. It won't hurt it. Then I dried it really well. Make sure to dry the glass thoroughly before you start painting because it needs to be completely dry so the paint will adhere properly. Be sure not to paint on wet surfaces. Dry it very well, both front and back, just like I'm doing now. Before painting, I decided to make a decorative detail using this mold. This is a number 4 mold from Stamperia. You can find it on my website, MyRestyling.com. It's a very well-made mold. The A4 molds are even larger than the A5 ones, so they're also bigger than those from Redesign. It's really well done with some very nice details. Now it's a silicone mold, but I decided to make the decorative elements using wood paste. Here you can see this natural wood paste because I needed to attach them to glass, so I couldn't use resin or any non-porous material. I absolutely had to use wood paste because at least wood paste, being a porous and flexible material, allows me to make the decoration and have it stick. I apply it with glue and it stays attached to the glass. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to attach a resin ornament to glass. Anyway, I would have had some difficulties. I would have needed to use a very strong glue. So inside the little box, you'll find this small bag with the wood paste. When it first arrives, it's quite malleable. Mine had been open for a while. When it's been open for a while, it might get a little hard. Now, I truly tried to do it properly, and I genuinely tried to see if I could meticulously shape it exactly like this with careful consideration. But as you can see, there are still some pieces that don't stick very well. Once you're done, make sure to close it tightly and put it back in the box right away because it tends to dry out. So now I've closed it well, and I tried to make it a bit longer because the frieze is quite long. As you can see, I have to make 2 side friezes, and they're really, really long. So I tried to stretch it out a bit, like when you roll out pasta to make tortelli. But you can see there are some little pieces that don't stick together very well. When that happens, you can add a little bit of nitro because nitro helps keep it compact and intact. Yeah, it doesn't really do anything. After all, it's just a solvent. It smells a bit, but then you can open the windows. If you want, you can even do it outside if you have a balcony or a garden. I did it in the workshop and then opened the window. It's not like the smell is that strong. Of course, it's a solvent, so it smells a bit. But what can you do? Solvents do smell. You see, I tried to make it a bit longer because it really needs to cover the whole frieze. So now I've taken the nitro, as you can see, and I've applied a bit to the paste to make it a little wetter. You don't need to use a ton of nitro. Just a little is enough. To make it a bit more compact, to moisten it a little, because if it dries out, little pieces will come off and they won't stick well. Instead, let's say that nitro is a bit like water for the paste. It helps keep it together. And I moistened it a bit. By the way, you can find nitro everywhere. You can find it at hardware stores, DIY shops. It's available everywhere. Just make sure to close it tightly right after using it because it can evaporate. So the nitro really helps keep the paste together. So you can see that all the little pieces that had come apart have now stuck together a bit. I'm trying to make it as long as possible. See, I stretch it out a bit with my fingers too because the trim is quite long. Then you need to press it in well, like I'm doing now, right into the mold, really well, using your fingers, into every little part of the mold. If you want it to come out nicely, you really have to stretch it out with your fingers, press it in thoroughly into every part. Otherwise, you'll end up missing some sections. You have to press it in well. Sometimes it's a bit tricky with your fingers. Maybe it takes a bit of practice, but if you try once or twice, you'll get the hang of it. I've been making these trims for a few years now, and I have to say the long ones are a bit harder to make because the mold is big. Since it's a size 4, it's not like the small trims. And the small trims take just a couple of minutes, but here it takes a bit longer because you really have to work the paste into all the little corners and crevices of the mold, and that takes a bit of time. So take your time. You can also add a bit more nitro. You can break off pieces. See, I add a bit more nitro because as I'm working, time passes, the paste is exposed to air, so it hardens a bit. And I add more nitro because if it gets too hard, you won't be able to handle it anymore. It won't be malleable. But with nitro, it goes back to normal. That's the nice thing about this paste. Just a bit of nitro and it goes back to normal. It's not like Dash. So after making my nice trim, I took this little roller that I showed you in the other video. Actually, I don't remember where I got it. Wait, let me close the nitro or it'll evaporate. I don't remember where I got this roller. Maybe you can find it on Amazon. Honestly, I don't remember. It's a wooden roller, so a rolling pin would work too if you have one at home. But this roller is handy because it has a handle and you can press down well with it, in my opinion. Anyway, try looking for it on Amazon. Maybe you'll find it. And I really go over the whole thing so that it gets pressed in well and the trim is nice and flat and well made. So you go over it again. This really helps to get a perfect trim. Now I'm going to remove it. Let's hope it comes out in one piece. It's always a bit tricky with these long trims. It's not like with the small ones. Okay, now a little piece broke off. Oh well, never mind. I'll just glue it back on separately. In the meantime, let's try to get the rest out. You really have to be careful. There we go. Well, it came out almost all in one piece except for a little bit. Now I'll glue it. I've got some white glue. I used Giotto, but you can use whatever you like, Vinavil, Valprit, whatever you prefer. The important thing is to use plenty of glue. Now I'm going to turn it over, being careful not to break it. Because it's a bit tricky, now I'm going to put on the glue. Use plenty of it. Thank you. Use a lot, especially when you're working with glass. Now I'll turn this around for you. I've turned the camera a bit so you can see. I'm really putting on a lot because since it's glass, you need plenty so it sticks. The clay is porous, but glass isn't. Don't skimp. Use plenty of glue. There, now I've put on almost all of it. Now I'll turn it over. You have to hope it's intact because since it's flexible, I've turned it around so you can see. Look, you need to hold it from both sides, being careful. Now I'm shaping it onto the glass because since I just made it, it's still flexible. If it had hardened, if I'd made it a few days earlier, it would have become hard. But you could just heat it up with a hair dryer or, even better, a heat gun because it gets hotter. That way, it would become flexible again. But since I just made it, it's already flexible, so it's easier to shape it onto the glass. I'm also attaching the little piece that broke off, so even if a piece breaks, it's not a problem. You can just stick it back on later, nothing happens. Shape it well. Then I took some water and a small brush and started removing all the glue residue because this is a glass. So since it's such a smooth surface, when you go to paint it, you'll see these residues. Also, when they dry, they stay on the surface, and it looks bad with all that glue left, unless you want a textured effect. I also took some paper to remove the bigger bits of residue. See, otherwise it looks bad. You need to finish it off well, because with such a smooth material, otherwise it shows. Remove all the residue everywhere so the work looks clean. There you go. In the meantime, I also made the other frieze. See how nice they turned out? I also removed all the glue. I made both friezes. They're mirror images of each other in the mold, so I was able to put one on one side and one on the other. And now let's start painting. First, I'll show you the bloody, specifically the bloody box. Bloody is a fairly intense red from our kit paints, and you need to mix it well. And as you can see, it's a beautiful, very nice red, not particularly thick. Let's say it's not super runny, but it's not thick either. These are actually the pigments inside. I can't really decide the consistency myself. It depends on the pigments. You need to mix it really, really well. What is this paint? This is a kit paint that you can make at home, and it will turn out just like I'm showing you now. But before we start painting, I want to show you the process to get it to look like this. So now I'll explain a bit about how to make the paint at home before applying it. So you'll find the bloody like this in a container. When you open it, inside you'll find a bottle with acrylic resin and a sachet with the powders. And inside there are instructions on how to make the paint. Everything is written out, including how much water to add and everything else. Based on the instructions on the package, measure out how much water to add to the paint. So first you measure the water before making the paint. Then you open the little sachet, cut off the ends. By the way, it's a biodegradable sachet, so it's not made of plastic. Put it into any container. I'm using this coffee one. Make sure it's a container that's a bit tall because you'll need to mix it and then add the water you measured earlier. Pour it in slowly, not all at once, just a little at a time, and mix it well for at least 2 minutes. Make sure there are no lumps, as you can see now. Mix it really well for at least 2 minutes. This mixer is a metal mixer. It's a tool opener, a mixer that, if you want, you can find on the MyRestyling website. Then blend the entire mixture. Blend it well, and make sure to use a blender that you don't use for food, a blender that you use only for paints. Blend it thoroughly for at least 5 minutes. Make sure to blend it really well. Next, take the small bottle that you find inside the package containing the acrylic resin. It's already pre-measured for each color, and pour it into the mixture you just blended slowly, pouring it in gradually, and then mix it well for at least another 2 minutes. You'll notice that the acrylic resin is white, so it seems like it makes the color lighter. But as you keep mixing, the color returns to its original shade, becoming a vibrant red again. The important thing is to mix it well for another 2 minutes. The acrylic resin is the binder. Then take a strainer, place it over the jar, the one provided in the kit, and pour in the mixture you just made, which is basically the paint. Strain it with the strainer into the special jar that comes with the package. This is because by filtering it with a strainer, you remove any lumps that may have formed during the preparation process. And there you go, your paint is ready. Close the lid, and if you want, you can remove the label from the packaging of whatever you used and stick it onto the jar. Otherwise, just write the name yourself. Sometimes the labels are a bit hard to peel off. Then write the date you made it. It's important to note the date because these paints last a month, 2 at most, since they're completely natural and contain no preservatives. Put the date on and the paint is done. Remember to use it within a month. Now that you've seen how it's made, let's start applying it. You can use this brush, which you can also find on the website. It's a size 30 because the surface is small. You can find it on the website, and it has very comfortable bristles that are just right for this paint. See how well it grips the glass? It doesn't repel at all. Now I'm applying it to the ornament as well. Look, on the glass, it doesn't repel. It doesn't need a primer. You see, I haven't used any primer underneath, so don't use anything because it could actually make things worse. Apply it directly, pure. Please do not dilute it with anything, not even with Pentasol, with nothing. The first coat should always be applied pure, so it adheres perfectly and has no issues because it's specifically designed to stick to all surfaces. Let me explain a bit about this paint. It's a paint made from rice starch and clay. So it's a completely natural paint. It doesn't contain preservatives. It doesn't have benzodiazole or isothiazole like all synthetic paints do. So it's not harmful to your health. It only contains about 20% acrylic resin. Depending on the color, some have 15%, some have 20% acrylic resin, which is needed to help it adhere to all surfaces. And obviously, there has to be a little bit of acrylic resin, otherwise it wouldn't stick. But that's the only synthetic element because it doesn't have any other synthetic preservatives. And it's not 100% acrylic like all the other paints you find on the market. It's a fairly natural paint. It adheres very well. It's made of clay. And if you buy this kit from the website, as you've seen, it's very easy to make. It only takes about 15 minutes and everything is ready to go. The little bag has everything pre-measured. If on the other hand you want to make it yourself, you can find recipes on YouTube. There's not a specific recipe for this red, but there are recipes for other colors. However, you'll need to buy all the ingredients yourself. You'll need to buy kaolin, which is the clay, rice starch, cellulose starch, pigments, and the acrylic resin, which is called primal, and then you can make the paint at home. There are recipes that show you exactly how to do it, so you don't have to buy the kit. You can make it yourself. Of course, if you buy the kit, which is actually very cheap right now because it's on sale, it's much faster, everything is included, and the acrylic resin is already measured out for each color, so you save a lot of time. Now, I finished the first coat, and I'm putting the brush inside this plastic wrap so it stays fresh because I don't feel like washing it before doing the second coat. Now I'm going to put it outside in the sun and soon I'll apply the second coat. Just a reminder, on glass you should wait 24 hours, but this is a good way to keep the brush in good condition. After leaving my plate out in the sun, I take it back. It was in the sun for about 2.5, 3 hours. Keep in mind that today it's 33 degrees. It would be better to wait at least 24 hours, but with this heat, this is what I did. Now I'm back in the workshop. I unwrap my brush, and before applying the second coat on top, I put the first coat on the bottom. So the underside of this particular plate is a bit more porous than the top surface because it's a slightly more matte glass. So you can clearly see how it covers much, much better. In fact, I truly think I'll only need 2 coats on the bottom, while on the top I'll probably need 3 coats, but it's a matte porous glass, so on porous surfaces, 2 generous coats of red paint are absolutely perfect, whereas on a surface like regular glass, which is very smooth and non-porous, you'll probably need 3 coats. And just to reiterate, this specific paint is not a chalk paint, it's actually a clay-based paint. What exact kind of clay is it? The clay we use is English kaolin, which you can find on our website in the pigment section. Why kaolin? Why clay? Because clay is a much more insulating material than plaster. So this isn't a chalk-based paint like the others, but rather a clay paint, meaning it's made with clay. Plaster is a much more insulating material, so it keeps tannins much more contained, making it much less likely for stains to appear compared to chalk paints. It's also a refractory material, so in my opinion, it's a better material than plaster for making paints. Now I've closed up my brush and I'm putting my plate back out in the sun. Now I'll dip my brush again and apply the second coat to the upper part of the glass, which is less porous than the bottom part. And you can see how well it covers. It really covers well. However, since I have these decorative details, I need to get into all the little crevices and corners. So I'll probably need to apply a third coat because with just 2 coats, I can't get all the way underneath. I'll do 3 coats, but if it had been a more porous material, I probably would have managed with just 2 coats because it really does cover well. And as I was saying, why clay and not plaster? As I mentioned, it's a material that's more resistant than plaster, especially when it comes to high temperatures, but it also resists humidity. That's why you get far fewer tannin stains with clay than with plaster, because it's a material that withstands moisture better. Since paints contain water, when you wet a surface, it gets damp, and very often the wood releases these tannins. But with clay, they come out much less. Of course, if they're going to come out, they will. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do. But I've really noticed that compared to chalk paints, with clay paints, it's much less likely for the tannins to come out. In fact, you end up using fewer sealers because clay itself already acts as a sealer. Then, if you want to seal even more, you can use Sandarak varnish, which will block everything. But really, I recommend you try it because you'll see that percentage-wise, tannin will come out much less with clay paint than with chalk paint. If you're used to chalk paint, you'll immediately notice the difference when you use clay paint. You'll see that almost no stains will appear except on those types of wood that release tannin so strongly that there's really nothing you can do about it. With those, oh well, it is what it is. So I then went on to apply the third coat. I decided to apply it by dabbing because with all these moldings, by dabbing, I can get a bit better into the little areas I couldn't reach when applying the paint smoothly. And also because later I wanted to do a wash. So by dabbing, probably by giving the paint some texture, the wash comes out a bit better too. It stands out a little more. So I applied the third coat by dabbing. But I wanted to talk to you about powder paints. Why did we create a paint using only powders without any water? Well, it's an environmental issue because we also need to try to respect and preserve the environment. If we don't add water to the paint right away, but the paint is basically just powders without water, it's because you'll add the water yourselves when you receive it at home. First of all, you save water because the water isn't being transported around. And since water is such an important resource for the planet, it gets saved because you only add it when you actually need to make the paint. Secondly, we also save carbon dioxide and the air quality improves as well because we're transporting a paint that's much lighter than all those paints that contain water. So we save fuel during transport, which means the air quality will be much better, the carbon dioxide will be much better. And thirdly, you also save money because you basically make it yourself, so it costs you less than a ready-made industrial paint. And fourth, this is a paint that isn't industrial. It doesn't need to be preserved because it doesn't contain water, at least until you make it, so it doesn't contain preservatives that could cause allergic reactions. Now I'm also going to apply the second coat to the lower part. So did you see how many advantages a powder paint can have? Because sometimes people just don't think about it. It's always been done this way. Paints have always been made with water. People have always bought ready-made paints. And maybe you don't realize that with a powder paint, you save water and everything that comes with it because saving water brings so many benefits, especially since water isn't infinite. Be careful because sooner or later, the planet will run out of water. We need water. So preserving it is very important. Sometimes people don't think about it because they've always bought ready-made paints. It's been done this way for years and years, and no one thinks about creating something new. But with powder paints, you really have so many advantages. You don't really think about it, but it's something worth considering. Now, I'm doing a sort of crisscross brushstroke to get better coverage. Anyway, you can see how well it's already covered with the second coat. That's because since the surface underneath is a bit more porous, 2 coats are enough, so I won't be applying a third one. I'd say this is good enough as it is. So now, after a few hours since I applied the first, second, and third coats, I waited a bit and then decided to apply this protective finish, which is semi-synthetic. You can also find the recipe for it on my YouTube channel. There's a video showing how to make it at home. It's a semi-synthetic protective finish because it's based on rice starch, but also contains acrytal. If you want it ready-made, you can find it in the decoupage section as decoupage glue because it's actually a glue that's perfect for rice paper, so we've included it in that section. However, it's also a protective finish for paint. Thank you. And why did I decide to apply this protective finish? Because as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to do some decorations later, like a wash and various other embellishments. Since this is glass, I don't want to do a wash with water directly on the paint because I could end up removing all the base color. That's why, since it's glass and I didn't want to get it too wet, I first apply a protective coat. This way, once it's protected, I can do all my decorations without worrying that everything underneath will come off. Why didn't I use Sandarak, the Sandarak varnish, for protection? I didn't use it because I want to use it as the final varnish. Since it's glass and since it will probably become a fruit bowl or a centerpiece, I want to apply it as the final varnish, as the final protective layer. So I don't want to apply another coat of Sandarak first, because if I were to apply 2 coats of Sandarak, since Sandarak is an alcohol-based varnish, the second coat could dissolve the first one, and as a result, remove both layers of color. So it's better to first seal the base color with this protective layer and then apply a direct coat of Sandarak at the end. You can see that this protective coating looks white right now, but it will turn transparent, so don't worry. In fact, on the other part, it's already become transparent. So, in short, be careful. If you have multiple colors, it's better to apply this layer underneath first. And then, if you want to use Sandarak varnish as a protective finish, which is really very strong and protective, you can apply it at the end. This protective coating is, let's say, less powerful than the Sandarak varnish. Now I've decided to use another brush because I need to get into the corners, and this one wasn't the right brush. I picked a pointed brush like this so I can properly protect all the corners. As I was saying, this protective coating is less durable than the Sandarak varnish and takes much longer to cure. It needs at least 2 or 3 weeks, whereas the Sandarak varnish is already cured in about 24 hours. However, I still apply it because it does offer some protection. If I put it on, I leave it for 24 hours, and tomorrow I can go ahead and do the wash, knowing it's protected. But it's not fully cured. It takes 2 to 3 weeks. So if you put the plate under water before that, everything will come off. On the other hand, Sandarak varnish is completely cured in 24 hours. So you can even put it under water and nothing will happen. I've decided to do it this way. Keep this in mind. If you have multiple colors, don't apply 2 coats of Sandarak directly because it will actually dissolve the 2 colors and create a mess. It's better to apply this first and then the other one on top. This one is fine anyway. Even though it's not fully cured in 24 hours, it still acts as a protective layer. For what I need to do, I mean, for a wash, it's fine, and for some decoration, it's fine too. Remember, if you want to use it as a final protective coat, that's fine, but you need to leave the furniture there for at least 2 or 3 weeks before it fully cures, so don't put anything on it in the meantime. Now I'll leave it here for 4 hours, and I'll see you tomorrow for the second part of the video.